You've walked past 1,000 people in your life, maybe more. You've heard their voices in crowded streets, shared elevators with them in silence, stood behind them in line. But how many did you truly see? Not their clothes, not their job, titles, or their smiles. But the hidden structure beneath the real machinery, their fears, their desires, their games, the parts they'd never show you even if you asked. Most people live in plain sight but remain unreadable. They move like shadows, dressed in human form, opaque, confusing, unknowable. And yet there's a way to see through them. Friedrich Nietzsche saw it. He saw through the illusion of morality. He saw through the comforting lies society tells itself. He saw that behind every face, every gesture, every noble word, there's a much deeper force at work. He called it the will to power. But that was only the beginning, because Nietzsche wasn't just a philosopher. He was a psychological surgeon. He dissected human behavior not to heal it, but to expose it, to lay bare the raw, uncomfortable, inconvenient truths that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Truths about manipulation, about fear, about self-deception. What he left behind wasn't just a philosophy. It was a map, a hidden blueprint. One that reveals how to read people not through their words, but through their instincts. Not by what they claim to be, but by what they cannot hide. This isn't about tricks or tactics. This isn't about charm or persuasion. This is about perception. Seeing clearly. Looking at a person and understanding instantly what drives them, what they're terrified, you might notice. Because the truth is, most people don't even know themselves. So that makes them easier to read than they think. You're not here to be comforted. You're here to wake up. Stop taking people at face value. To see through the act. 18 psychological truths aren't abstract theories. They're weapons. And once you understand them, you'll begin to see the world differently. The way a magician sees the trick before it's done. The way a hunter hears movement before it happens. The way a master chess player predicts a move 5 steps before it's made. You'll see the real reasons people say what they say. You'll notice the lie beneath the compliment. The need behind the silence. The wound behind the rage. This is not comfortable knowledge, but it is powerful. Once you possess it, you cannot unsee it. So if you're ready, if you want to read people not as they wish to be seen, but as they truly are, then listen closely. Because Nietzsche saw into the soul of man. What he found there wasn't light. It was fire, ruthless, untamed, and real. Now, let's begin. Most people spend their entire lives mastering a single skill, how to appear normal. They learn to smile when they're anxious. They learn to nod in agreement even when they disagree. They learn the subtle art of being invisible in plain sight. But this is not honesty. It's camouflage. Friedrich Nietzsche saw the world not as a collection of individuals, but as a stage crowded with actors. Each performing a role they didn't write for an audience they secretly resent. From birth, we're taught that appearances matter. That if we just present ourselves correctly, if we're agreeable, polite, pleasant, then we'll be accepted, loved, rewarded. But Nietzsche believed the opposite. He believed that the surface is where truth goes to die. That the more someone smiles, the more they're likely hiding. That politeness is often a disguise for manipulation, conformity, or fear. Psychological truth number 1. People wear masks to survive. Not always consciously, not maliciously, but because the raw truth of the human condition, our ambition, jealousy, insecurity, lust, and rage is simply too much for others to bear, and often too much for us to admit, so we conceal it. Personalities like armor. We choose words not to express what we feel, but to conceal what we think. It's not hard to see. A politician smiles while lying, a lover flatters when they've already detached, a manager praises right before betrayal. Truth number 2, the more polite someone is, the more they're hiding. In Nietzsche's eyes, kindness isn't always kindness. It can be cowardice. It can be a strategy. It can be the smile of the defeated, the slave who praises the master. It's not out of love, but to avoid punishment. He called this the morality of the herd. slave morality, system of ethics built not on strength, on fear. It teaches us to suppress ambition, to vilify power, to hide desire. And so, society rewards those who master the surface, the agreeable, the pleasant, the obedient. But Nietzsche asked, what happens to the parts of us we bury? Do they disappear, or do they fester? Truth number 3. Every man has two sides, the self he shows and the self he fears. The public self and the shadow self. The curated version we present to others and the darker, more primal version we keep locked away. But sometimes the mask slips in anger, in desire, in weakness, and in that moment, the truth reveals itself. Nietzsche warned that most people are not fully conscious. They are split, divided, living double lives, one hidden. And the more convincing their act, the more disturbing their truth often is. He once wrote, "We have art in order not to die of the truth." It wasn't a celebration of creativity. It was a confession. We paint over the chaos of our souls. We sculpt lies into beauty, because the raw truth of what we are is unbearable. We think reading people means studying faces, gestures, or tone. But real insight begins when you stop asking, what is this person showing me? Start asking, what is this person desperately trying not to reveal? Because in the end, the human mask is fragile. It may smile, it may bow. It always trembles. And if you look closely, it cracks. There is a comforting illusion that human beings are rational creatures, that we make decisions through logic, that we act according to principle, justice, or truth. But Nietzsche didn't buy into that story. He believed people are driven by something much older, much deeper. Not reason, not virtue, but raw instinct, hidden drives, what he called the will to power. Truth number 4. Will to power is in every one, even saints. We often think of the will to power as domination, as aggression. But Nietzsche saw it more subtly. He saw it as the engine behind almost every human action, to influence, to assert, to be seen, to matter. Even the saint who renounces the world, who fasts and forgives and preaches compassion is, in Nietzsche's view, exercising power in disguise, not through force, but through moral superiority, through guilt, through control over how others feel. And here's the uncomfortable part. Nietzsche believed that what we call morality is often just ambition rebranded, because most people don't seek truth. They seek comfort, security, validation, a narrative that flatters them. Truth number 5. People rarely want truth. They want comfort. A man says he wants honesty but flinches at criticism. A woman says she wants authenticity but filters her every word for approval. A society says it wants justice but worships those who appear righteous, not those who are. We surround ourselves with ideas that make us feel noble. We build identities that make us feel virtuous. But underneath it all, Nietzsche believed there is always a hunger, drive. Truth number 6. Behind every virtue lies a hidden hunger. Take the philanthropist. Is he giving to ease suffering or to feel superior? Take the activist. Is she fighting for justice or for recognition? Take the teacher. Is he guiding others or trying to compensate for his own sense of failure? Nietzsche's point wasn't that goodness is fake. It's that most goodness is mixed with ego, with pain, with desire, because humans are not clean, consistent beings. They are contradictions wrapped in rationalizations, and those rationalizations are powerful. We don't just lie to others, we lie to ourselves every day. We convince ourselves that we're selfless when we're just afraid of being alone. We call ourselves kind when we're really just conflict avoidant. We call ourselves loyal when we're just scared to walk away. Nietzsche knew that self-deception is humanity's greatest instinct. It protects us from the chaos of our motives. But it also blinds us to the truth, and that blindness has consequences. Because the world is full of people who appear noble but act rotten. People who say the right things but live the opposite. And in the modern world, nowhere is this more obvious than in the spectacle of image management. Think of the influencer who preaches mental health. but secretly abuses their staff. Think of the billionaire who funds green initiatives while building empires of exploitation. Think of the politician who promises justice while silencing dissent. What Nietzsche saw, what many still ignore, is that public morality is often a performance, carefully engineered front. A story we tell the world to gain admiration. A story we tell ourselves to avoid shame. At the core of this lie is a psychological virus, Nietzsche, called resent. It's not simple resentment. It's deeper. It's the inverted morality of the weak. Those who lack power, but instead of confronting that reality, they rewrite morality to punish the strong. They tell themselves that strength is evil, ambition is cruel, confidence is arrogance, and in doing so, they justify their weakness as virtue. They attack not because they care about truth, but because they are bitter, because they feel small, because they envy. Resentment is the fuel of moral outrage. It's what turns disappointment into righteousness, what turns insecurity into superiority. And once you see it, you start to understand why so much of modern discourse feels hollow, why so many arguments feel staged, why so many people wear masks not to deceive you, but to protect their fragile self-image. Nietzsche wasn't trying to make us cynical. He was trying to make us clear-sighted. He wanted us to ask not what someone claims to believe, but what they're really after. Not what they say, but what they hunger for. It's not what they show, but what they fear you might uncover. Because beneath every virtue, there's a motive, a hunger, a hidden engine. And the closer you get to it, the more real a person becomes. We like to believe that words are tools of connection, that language brings us closer, builds bridges, solves problems. But Nietzsche didn't see it that way. He believed that beneath the surface of almost every conversation lies a struggle, often invisible but always present, a negotiation of power, a battle for position, subtle war. Truth number 7. Every compliment carries an agenda. When someone praises you, ask why. Not because the praise is always false, but because it's rarely free. A compliment can uplift or disarm, can build trust or buy control. Sometimes it's genuine. Often, it's a strategy. The friend who flatters you may want access to your time. The colleague who sings your praises may be softening you before they strike. The partner who idealizes you may be building a fantasy they'll soon resent. Nietzsche believed that humans are rarely honest, even when they're being kind. Because kindness, like cruelty, can be a means of influence, a form of subtle manipulation. Truth number 8. People manipulate because they are weak. It sounds backwards, but it's not. The strong don't need to deceive. They speak plainly, assert openly, but the weak they scheme, flatter. They twist. They use emotional tactics instead of direct confrontation because they lack the strength to risk rejection, or the power to win a fair fight. Manipulation is the weapon of those who fear transparency. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's survival, but it always reveals something crucial: insecurity hiding beneath the surface. Nietzsche believed that most relationships, even the intimate ones, are quietly political. Consider the friend who gives you advice. That makes you doubt yourself. They may claim concern, but what they're really doing is lowering your confidence so they can feel superior, keep you dependent. Or the boss who reassures you that you're doing great, while stalling your promotion. The words seem kind, but the intent is to pacify, not empower, to keep you in place. Communication, Nietzsche believed, is not neutral. It's never just about words. It's about position, status, influence. It's about power. And nowhere is this clearer than in those who shout their virtues the loudest. Truth number 9. The louder the virtue, the darker the vice. Nietzsche was skeptical of those who perform morality for others. He believed that when someone constantly signals their goodness, their equality, their compassion, it's often a mask for deeper hidden drives. The person who never stops talking about justice may be hiding their thirst for revenge. Who demands constant tolerance may be incapable of accepting any challenge to their beliefs. The louder the virtue, the more suspicious the motive. Because if you are truly secure in your values, You don't need to broadcast them. You don't need applause. You don't need the herd. But most people do. And that, Nietzsche warned, is where the danger begins. He believed in the concept of herd morality, the idea that society doesn't reward truth, it rewards conformity. It praises those who flatter the group and punishes those who think independently. In such a system, communication becomes less about discovery and more about obedience. Say the wrong thing, and you're ostracized. Speak the truth too plainly, and you're labeled dangerous. Not because the truth is false, but because it disrupts the group's comfort. So we learn to speak carefully, politely. We choose silence over honesty, praise over criticism, agreement over clarity. But Nietzsche would argue, that's not peace, that's surrender. Every interaction becomes a balancing act. It's not just about what is said, but what is left unsaid. Every sentence is a move on a chessboard. Every compliment, a gambit. Every argument, a duel. Because even in the most casual conversation, someone is winning, someone is losing. And most never even realize the game is being played. There's a strange phenomenon that repeats itself throughout history, psychology, and daily life. The person who preaches morality the loudest is often the one who violates it most privately. It's the one who publicly attacks others' flaws, often hides the very same flaws deep within themselves. Nietzsche saw this long before it became a pop psychology cliché. He didn't just observe it, he dissected it. Truth. #10. Accusation is confession. People think judgment is about others. That when someone points a finger, they're exposing someone else's truth. But Nietzsche knew that judgment often reveals more about the accuser than the accused. A man who constantly condemns dishonesty may be the one who lies most artfully. A woman obsessed with purity may be drowning in repressed desire. A leader who wages war in the name of peace may secretly crave power more than justice. Because what people cannot accept in themselves, they look to destroy in others. This is projection, the act of taking your own disowned traits and casting them onto someone else. Nietzsche understood this instinct not as a rare quirk, but as a core feature of human psychology. Truth number 11. People hate in others what they repress in themselves. We don't just dislike traits in others. We react most intensely to the ones that mirror the things we cannot face in ourselves. An insecure man will mock confidence. A passive person will resent assertiveness. Someone ashamed of their own anger will be triggered by the smallest sign of confrontation. These reactions aren't random, they're personal. Because the shadow, those parts of ourselves we bury, deny, or disown, doesn't disappear. It festers. And when we see it reflected in someone else, it ignites something ancient, something dangerous. This is why outrage often feels disproportionate. Why some people react to disagreement with fury. Why minor flaws in others are treated as unforgivable crimes. Truth number 12. The more intense the judgment, the more personal the projection. Modern culture is saturated with moral crusades, public shaming, cancel culture, virtue signaling. But Nietzsche would argue that much of it isn't about justice. It's about internal conflict. It's easier to attack than to reflect. It's easier to destroy a scapegoat than confront your own contradictions. And that's the danger. Because when judgment becomes a substitute for self-awareness, society becomes a theater of projection. We see it everywhere. The gossip who destroys reputations while hiding her own secrets. The online activist who polices language but abuses people in private. The moral crusader who shouts about corruption while hiding financial fraud. These aren't anomalies, they're symptoms. Symptoms of a society that encourages moral performance but punishes. Genuine introspection, Nietzsche warned us. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process, he does not become a monster. It's a simple warning but devastating in its implications. Because the moment we direct our hatred outward, without examining what we're running from inward, we become the very thing we claim to oppose. Carl Jung would later expand on this with his concept of the shadow self, the hidden, rejected parts of our psyche. And Freud saw projection as a basic psychological defense. But Nietzsche saw its social consequences. He understood that when projection becomes widespread, culture itself becomes delusional, a mass psychosis of judgment and denial. The truth is, most people are not fighting for justice. They're fighting for relief. From guilt, from shame, from the weight of their own unresolved contradictions, so they judge, they moralize, they burn witches. Whether literal or digital, but they do not reflect, because reflection is harder. It requires silence, humility, brutal self-honesty. Nietzsche's insight is clear when someone lashes out in judgment. Don't just look at who they're attacking. Ask what they're hiding. Ask what they're afraid of within themselves. Ask what they've buried so deeply that now it must be hunted outside. Because once you understand projection, the world looks different. You stop taking accusations at face value. You stop falling for the theater of outrage. And you start seeing people not for what they say they are, but for what they're terrified you might notice. In the end, judgment is rarely just about justice. It's often a mirror, a confession, a cry from the unconscious, whispering, "This is who I am. It's what I cannot face." For most of the day, most people are performing, smiling when they don't feel joy, agreeing to things they resent, nodding, pausing, speaking in carefully measured tones. Not because it's real, but because it's expected. But no mask is perfect. And under pressure, even the most disciplined persona begins to crack. Nietzsche believed that if you want to see someone's truth, don't listen to their speeches. Watch what happens when they're under stress, when they're rejected, when they're given sudden power. Truth number 13. Micro-reactions betray intent. The face is the last to lie, and the first to leak the truth. When someone's complimenting you, but their eyes tighten. When their smile flickers into a smirk before they correct it. When their voice says, "I understand," but their fingers curl into fists. These are the cracks, the barely visible glitches in the performance. Modern behavioral psychology now confirms what Nietzsche intuited more than a century ago. Beneath conscious awareness, our bodies constantly betray us. We leak emotion in milliseconds. We flinch at truth, tense when exposed. It's not the big gestures that reveal a person. It's the stutters, the double takes, the delay before a yes. It's the too long pause before a no. The subtle change in tone when power shifts in a room. These moments are data. And Nietzsche would argue they reveal more than hours of conversation ever could. Truth. 14. Choice of words reveals mental patterns. Even more than body language. Language itself is a mirror. People don't just communicate ideas. They communicate their worldview, their anxieties, their obsessions. A person who constantly uses the word deserve is maybe obsessed with fairness or quietly resentful of their place in life. Someone who always jokes about cheating may be normalizing it for a reason. A leader who says, "I," more than we may be less collaborative than they pretend. Patterns matter, repetition matters. Nietzsche believed that language was not just a tool of expression, it was a symptom, behavioral fingerprint. In the heat of an argument, people don't invent insults, they default to the ones that live closest to their fears. When someone is flustered, the metaphors they reach for say more about their internal world than their logic ever could. Our words give us away, not always in what they say, but in how we choose to say them. Truth number 15. People show you who they are in moments of stress, rejection, or power. When people are calm, they can maintain the act. But the moment pressure is applied, the performance fractures in dating. Someone's reaction to rejection is often more revealing than how they behave during attraction. A person who turns cruel, desperate, or manipulative in the face of no is revealing their emotional blueprint. They were never safe, or only calm. In leadership, true character doesn't show in speeches, it shows when power is suddenly given. What does the new manager do with control? Does their tone change? Do they isolate, dominate, belittle? Nietzsche knew that most people don't want power to do good. They want power to stop feeling weak. Once they get it, they don't become better, they become honest. Stress, rejection, and power are psychological X-rays. They strip away the surface and reveal the skeleton of the self, Nietzsche wrote. There is more wisdom in your body than in your deepest philosophy. He wasn't just being poetic. He meant that our instincts are our physical reactions. Our emotional triggers reveal truths the rational mind spends its whole life trying to conceal. And in that sense, Nietzsche anticipated what behavioral scientists would later explore in detail. Studies now show that facial microexpressions, linguistic analysis, and stress response behaviors can predict future actions far more reliably than personality tests or interviews. In betrayal, you see the real person. In humiliation, you hear the real voice. In sudden authority, you meet the real self. These are not just moments of exception. They are moments of revelation. So if you want to read someone stop waiting for what they'll say, wait for when the pressure hits. Wait for when something doesn't go their way. Wait for when they win and no longer need to be nice. That's when you see the truth. Not in the moment they prepare for, but in the moment they forget to perform. Because no matter how well the mask is painted, under stress, under rejection, under power, the cracks always show. It's one thing to read others, to peel back their layers, trace their drives, spot their projections. But Nietzsche's final and most dangerous truth wasn't about other people. It was about you. Because in the end, the greatest illusion isn't the one others wear, it's the one you wear every day in the mirror. Truth number 16. Your judgments reveal your wounds. Think of the things that irritate you most in others. What traits do you mock? What behaviors trigger your scorn? What beliefs make your blood boil? These aren't random dislikes. They're windows into your unfinished business. The person who hates arrogance may be terrified of their own smallness. The one who detests neediness may carry unresolved guilt over their own dependence. The critic of laziness may be hiding a deep-seated fear of worthlessness. Nietzsche believed that our harshest criticisms aren't about morality, they're echoes. They come from the wounded places inside, so we haven't dared to explore. But judgment is only one piece of the puzzle. Truth number 17. Your attractions reveal your desires. We're often drawn to people we claim not to understand. But attraction, whether romantic, aspirational, or even adversarial, is a compass. And it points not outward, but inward. The traits you admire in others, their confidence, their indifference, their ambition, these are often the traits you've buried within yourself. And in that sense, the people you chase, the ones you envy, the ones you obsess over, they are mirrors, reflecting back the parts of you you've disowned, the potential you've suppressed. You don't fall for people by accident. You fall into resonance with what's already inside you, waiting to be awakened. But not all resonance is sweet. Sometimes what haunts you is more telling than what inspires you. Truth, H18. Your enemies reveal your shadow. Nietzsche's most unsettling idea was that your enemies are not your opposites. They are your unconscious twins. The politician you despise may embody the ambition you won't admit to. The influencer who enrages you may personify the need for attention you claim to reject. The rival who gets under your skin may carry the chaos you secretly crave. We like to believe we are fully conscious, that we choose our beliefs, our goals, our identities. But Nietzsche believed this was a comforting lie. He argued that most people aren't living there defending against the truth of who they are, defending against their own instincts, desires, and darkness. He called out humanity's most perfected art, self-deception. You can read every book, spot every lie in every person you meet. But if you cannot look inward with the same unflinching eye, you're just playing a more sophisticated version of the same game. That's where Nietzsche introduced the idea of the Berman Chauffin, misunderstood as a kind of superhuman. But what he meant wasn't physical strength or dominance. He meant a person who has overcome their own lies, who has faced their chaos without flinching, who has looked into the abyss and not turned away. Not someone who has mastered others, but someone who has mastered themselves. In a world designed to keep you distracted, in a culture that rewards outrage, conformity, and curated identities. Self-awareness is rebellion. Silence is power. Solitude is revolution. So the final question isn't, can you read people? Can you decode the signs, spot the games, predict the lies? The real question is harder, more dangerous. Can you sit alone without a scream, without a story, without noise, and face the truth of who you really are? Not the mask, not the image, not the performance, just you. In silence, in darkness, clarity. Because that Nietzsche would say is the rarest act of all. And in a world full of deception, projection, and noise, it might be the only truth that matters. You began this journey looking outward, trying to understand others, to see through the masks, the performances, the quiet manipulations that shape human behavior. Now you've crossed into something deeper. Because once you learn to see, you can't unsee. Every conversation becomes a decoding. Every compliment, a signal. Every act of outrage or praise an X-ray into someone's hidden wounds. Begin to realize that most people are not what they show. They're what they hide. A mosaic of insecurity, hunger, and denial stitched together by habit. Reading others gives you power. It helps you navigate a world full of noise. It protects you from illusion, sharpens your edge. But Nietzsche's ultimate gift wasn't just the map to others, it was the mirror to yourself. You begin to notice your own masks, the lies you tell in silence, roles you've rehearsed so well you forgot they weren't you, the judgments that echo your own unresolved pain, the enemies who carry your buried shadow, and then something shatters. The illusion of the fixed self begins to dissolve. Not in chaos, but in clarity. You start to live not as a puppet of your unconscious, but as a witness to it. Begin to make choices, not just reactions. You stop chasing surface validation and instead pursue inner alignment. Because true power is not manipulation. It's not charisma. It's the ability to see clearly through others and through yourself. Most people spend their lives trying to be liked, or followed, or obeyed. But Nietzsche would ask, can you obey yourself? Can you sit in silence, feel the full weight of your instincts, your contradictions, your fears, and not flinch? Can you make peace with who you are, even when it doesn't fit the story you tell? Because only then are you free. Not free from society, not free from others. Free from illusion, free to act, not perform, free to speak, not signal, free to live, not role-play. Nietzsche wrote, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded," and most people are. Commanded by trends, by fears, by childhood scripts they never rewrote, by identities they never chose. But the few, they're very few who can obey themselves. They are not owned, not swayed, not asleep. They are awake. And once you awaken, you no longer just see people, you see through them and beyond them. And most importantly, you see through yourself. That is not just understanding, that is liberation.